All right, welcome everyone. My name is Rachel Izagiri with Plano Public Library, and I want to thank you all for joining us for Protecting Our Children with Plano Police. Since you're all muted, if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat. We are monitoring the chat to assist you with any technical issues and collecting questions, and we'll be sure to have time for questions throughout the presentation and at the end. We want to make sure we're bringing you programs and resources that you want and need, so please fill out the survey, which will pop up at the end of the program. Some housekeeping reminders we want to share with everyone. This program is streaming live on the Plano Public Library YouTube channel, and a recording will be available this week for later viewing. You can also see any previous Plano Police workshops we've hosted these past few months on there already. Soliciting business or selling merchandising during library virtual programs is prohibited, so please show respect for our presenter and one another throughout the program. And again, if you have any questions for our presenter, ask them in the chat and we'll share throughout the presentation. So let me begin with a question. Would you like to know how criminals select their targets and what you can do to reduce the odds of being the next victim? If you answered yes to that question, you're in the right place. Our speaker today has been a police officer for over 24 years. For the past 14 years, his full-time assignment has been in the Crime Prevention Unit, providing people with safety education to protect themselves, their families, and their property. Helping us today with our protection of children, please join me in welcoming from the Plano Police Department, certified speaking professional, certified crime prevention specialist, and back-flipping popo, Officer Chris Bianez.
Rachel, thank you so much. Well, welcome everyone. Imagine that you are responsible to watch a child that's on the playground in a park, and you're distracted for just a moment. And when you look up, the child is gone. That's just the beginning of the frightening experience for one of our Plano families. The year was 1993. The location was Carpenter Park in Plano, Texas. Richard and his wife were there because their 12-year-old son, Brett, was in the soccer tournament. It was the kickoff of the soccer season. The 7-year-old daughter, Ashley, was there as well. She was dressed in all black and white. And when they realized that she was gone, as you could imagine, panic set in. And they reached out to a police officer who was in the street directing traffic, asking for help. And she was on the playground one moment, and this is broad daylight, and the next moment, she was gone. So they went and they reached out and they found that police officer. And here's a news report of something that happened.
Is of a horrible crime that shocked not only Plano, but the Dallas-Fort Worth area and the nation. Tuesday night, the Fox Network show, America's Most Wanted, featured a segment on Ashley Estelle, the happy 7-year-old who liked to dance and play. The abduction and murder
Officer
of an innocent
Bianez,
child leaves indelible pain.
we can't see the video.
You could not see the video?
Nope. It's still on the This Program Begins in screen.
Oh. So the whole time I was talking, it was on This Program Begins?
Yes.
I know exactly what happened. Okay, so let's try this again. We're going to have to push out. Okay, let me publish this. And let's try that again.
Is of a horrible crime that shocked not only Plano, but the Dallas-Fort Worth area and the nation. Tuesday night, the Fox Network show, America's Most Wanted, featured a segment on Ashley Estelle, the happy 7-year-old who liked to dance and play. The abduction and murder of an innocent child leaves indelible pain.
Ashley Estelle was in broad daylight with 1,000 people in the park, and no one saw who took her. If you're going to give up some precious family time to be here tonight, thank goodness this topic is something important to you, and especially important for those who you love and care about, because tonight we're talking about your personal safety. I'm sorry. We're not talking about that. I've got everything messing up on me today. We're talking, and now that's moved ahead. Hold on. This is why that I like tonight. We're talking about protecting children. So you see that now, right? Okay. So I have to give you a disclaimer. The disclaimer is that we are going to be talking about some scary things tonight, but the goal is not to scare you. The goal, I think I'm going to turn off this. I'm going to go back to a different mode here. So that way I'm seeing what hopefully you're seeing at the same time. Let's try this now. Okay. So it's not to scare you. Parents, and caretakers, if you end up feeling like this, well, then this training has failed you. We're not trying to scare you, but we definitely want to raise your awareness. We want to raise your awareness of things that pertain to keeping children safe so that we can empower you to be able to help with your efforts to safeguard our children. So my name is Christopher Bianez. It's like be honest, don't lie. It's just not spelled that way. It's Bianez. And I've got the best job in the police department because my full-time job is safety education. Now, if I had only one thought that I could share with you in terms of protecting children, the most important thing for you to know is you can protect children. It's vitally important for you to know that and to recognize that because that's going to help you go a long way. The first thing I want to do is a quick little speed interview. I'm going to have you type into the chat when you think of children, what are your greatest fears when it comes to their safety? And we're going to talk about safety in terms of violence that could occur to the child. So not like falls or being electrocuted or drowning, but where someone might attack. What are your greatest fears in terms of your child's safety? And if you will go to the chat and type that in, well, I want to take a look over here and see what you're coming up with. So what do you say, people? Your greatest fears when it comes to children being safe? I'm not even seeing where I can. Oh, I know why, because I'm screen sharing. I'm going to have to need your help over there. So what are you seeing in there? Can you read it out for me?
So far, nothing yet.
Nothing yet. Okay.
Abduction.
So when it comes to children being safe, what are your greatest fears?
The first one we got from Sherry is abduction.
Abduction. What else? Good.
Kidnapped.
What else do you think? Kidnapping.
Not being able to trace them.
Yeah, not being able to trace them. That would be scary. Anything
Road
else?
accident.
Road accident. Every time I've asked a group of parents, what are your greatest fears? These
online predators.
The top three. One, abduction. Second is sexual assaults. And the third is murder. And those are the types of things we're going to be discussing today. Today, we're going to be talking about violence towards children. And particularly the reason we talk about sexual assaults is because of the irreparable damage that it does. So our format is, why is this topic important? What are the ABCs that I've identified to help you protect children? And then what some case studies. We're going to look at some of the case studies of children where they've been injured. What takeaways can we take to be able to keep them safe? So people have asked me, why is this so important? Why do you jump to the rafters and hang on the ceilings and do chin-ups and talk to kids? And so in order to answer that, I guess you'd have to hear the rest of the story, to quote old, how can you, I just lost the person who said it, but the rest of the story. So for me, as a child, like most kids, I loved my mom. And by the time that I was 12, I had my life figured out. I was going to be a police officer, make the world a better place by getting rid of all the drugs. I was influenced by a bunch of TV shows. You remember those shows? Oh, yes. And I'm from Los Angeles, so Adam 12 was
One Adam 12.
Another one I liked was the Mod Squad. I wanted to the things that capture those people on drugs, throwing them in jail. And then there was a person I met who played football. He was like 20 years old and I was just 12. And he started taking me around to places and having fun. And one of the days he asked me, he said, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I told him my plan to be a police officer, get rid of all the drugs. And then he looked at me kind of pathetic like, and he said, you know, your parents use drugs, right? And I was so offended. I was like, what? How dare you? Don't ever talk to me. I hate you. I was so mad. I went stomping home. And then on the way home, all of a sudden it hit me. My parents did some strange things. They go in the bedroom, they lock the door behind them, broad daylight with their friends. And so inquiring minds had to know. And I snuck in there and I peeled back the wallpaper so that from the outside, I could peek in. The next time my parents locked that door, I snuck around. I peeked through that window just in time to see my parents take out a black bag with a spoon that was bent in half and burnt on the bottom. They put it over a flame and lit it on fire. And my mom tied off her arm and then took out this nasty looking syringe and put it in that spoon. And I'll never forget, as I was watching my mom bring that needle to her arm, I'm like, don't do it, mama. And when she stuck that needle in her arm, I felt like my life was ruined. How am I going to be a police officer and arrest these druggies when in fact my parents were druggies? And to make matters worse, I had 5 brothers and sisters. And so I thought in my little brain, if I don't turn in my parents for the drugs, I can't be an officer. And so I was so discouraged. I went and snuck in that room and I found some of the drugs. I flushed them down the toilet. And as you could imagine, when my stepfather found out I flushed those drugs, I got the beating of my life. And I ran back to that 20-year-old and I told him what happened. And I told him I was grounded for life. And he says, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm leaving. I'm running away. And he said to me, he says, I'm moving. If you want, you can go with me. And I told him, I do want to go with you. And so this guy hooked me up. He gave me $200 cash and a bus ticket and instructions to get on that bus and to meet him in Eureka, California. So I left Glendale, California, got on a bus. Before I left, I told my grandma where I was going. And I got on this bus and I drove there. And then when I got off the bus, I was thinking, what if the guy's not there? But he came running up and gave me a big hug, was happy to see me. And then we got into his van and we drove up to the coast. We went all the way up to Salem, Oregon. And we ended up in this little apartment on Christmas Eve. And when I woke up the next day and I saw those presents, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, when did he have time to get the presents? And on the way there, he told me something that melted my heart. He said, from this day forward, I am your father and you are my son. And he didn't know the story that my dad left when I guess he beat my mother when I was 9 months old. And I was just so happy to have someone who cared about me. And so I was there looking at the presents and he asked me, you want to open the presents? I said, okay. He said, all right, well, take off your underwear and go sit by the tree. And I'm like, why do I got to take off my underwear? And all of a sudden, he just snapped. Have you ever known someone like that? He goes, because I bought you somewhere now. And so there I was, 12 years old, naked, trying to hide my junk, and Freaky Deaky Man is taking pictures. Now, I wish that was the worst of my story, but that's where it just began. That night when I went to sleep on Christmas Eve in 1973, when I woke up, he was molesting me. And I ran all the way and landed on this couch. Now, I don't know why I didn't run out the door. I've thought about it a lot. But one thing that I do know is that there's so many. 1 out of 3 girls and 1 out of 6 boys will have sexual contact with someone before they're 18 years old. About 6 months later, FBI knocked on the door and they took him. What happened with him was he was released with no charges being filed. I'm not going to have you go through this, but when I'm talking to the youth, I ask what they would do. Usually they want to lock him up forever. But what happened was he was released, no charges filed. And I was sent to jail. And the kids don't like that. You went to jail. Yeah. Why'd I go to jail? Well, for running away. And so the reason it's important to me is I went through this. But I found out that I'm not the only one going through this. There are many young people, most young people who are abused by people the child knows and the child trusts. So we're going to talk about how we can protect them. And I've given this a lot of thought. We're going to start with what I call the ABCs. So the first thing is for A, is awareness. B stands for build relationships of trust, and C is for communication. So awareness. One thing you need to be aware of is no one has more power to protect a child than you, the caretaker. Whoever's in charge of that child, the parent, the guardian, you have more power. And the same thing I can say is no one has more ability to harm the child than the parent or the caretaker. And this story is a perfect example. Let's take a look.
The mother, accused of beating her daughter to death, shot up heroin with her boyfriend and tortured that little girl mercilessly. 30-year-old Jerry Casadas charged with injury to a child, and she could face more charges. Casadas' arrest warrant says 2 weeks ago she and her boyfriend Charles Pfeiffer shot up heroin, then beat 4-year-old Liliana Rose Wright because she drank her 18-month-old brother's juice box. And that is not all. Police say Liliana was choked and tied up in a closet later that day. Liliana died the next day at the hospital. Investigators have not said if the boyfriend will face any charges.
I had someone, one of our workers from the library, do some research, and one of the findings that he discovered was that violence towards children is getting worse. And so it's just heartbreaking when you hear of these cases like Andrea Yates and Darlie Routier and Dana Schlosser. There's a great book written by Gavin de Becker, Protecting the Gift, and the gift being the child. And he says, I can't say it any more clearly than this: to protect your child, you must believe in yourself. And he says one of the key reasons is because as parents, we're given this right to know our children, and we have this wonderful gift of our intuition. And he discusses this in that book, and also another great book that he published called The Gift of Fear. And in there, he describes intuition as that gut feeling, or some people call it women's intuition. But he says it's like going from A all the way to Z without stopping at the other letters along the way. In other words, it's your internal warning system that something is wrong, and it's your ability to know without knowing why. Think about times in your life where you didn't like a person from the word go, and someone called you on it and said, you don't like that person, do you? You're like, no, I do not. Why? I don't know. I just don't. And at the time, you couldn't articulate it because you didn't have any data. But later, when the stories came in and you learned more about that person, whew, you were right. And that was your intuition. So learn to trust your intuition. And it may not be a big, loud voice. It may be a small, quiet voice. There was one lady once in one of my programs, and she came up to me afterwards, and she cried and cried. And I asked her what was wrong, and she was really upset. She says, I feel like I failed my son. And I said, I'm not sure you failed him. Why do you think that? Well, he walked up to her one day when she was in the kitchen, and she was busy, making, I think it was Thanksgiving dinner. So she had a lot of things to do, and she was working. And her son said, Mom, what do you think of this person? And he was referencing the youth pastor. And she goes, I think he's great. And so he didn't say anything else. And then later, years later, he made the outcry that he had been being sexually assaulted by this pastor for years. And she realized that was the outcry, and she missed it because it was so small. And so a lot of times what you're looking for is that still small voice, and maybe not something big and loud to look at. Okay, so the good news is that stranger danger is rare, but the bad news is it does happen. And when it happens, it can really affect people. And sometimes it's close to home. Some of you probably remember that story of the Duggar family where the older son was molesting his younger siblings, and they actually sent him off to live someplace else to protect the younger children. But this is not something that only happens to people on reality TV. This happens more than we would care to know. And things can happen inside the home from family members. And so it's incumbent upon us that are responsible for children to make sure they're safe, even with people they dwell with. And we'll talk about some more of that when we get to the communications. And this thing about being close to home was really came to for this girl, Jenna Quinn. She wrote a book called Pure in Heart, And some of you if you're from Texas, you've heard of Jenna laws, where they have to have sexual assault type of training in all the schools. That came from Jenna Quinn's story. And her story was her father's very best friend happened to be her coach as well. And the family all lined up. Her dad and the man, they were best friends. The mom and his wife were best friends. And the kids, they're almost all the same age. And so they went on all kinds of trips together. Well, he ultimately ends up sexually assaulting Jenna Quinn. And let me tell you, when Jenna's father found out, it was all they could do to restrain him. They actually they talked dad into staying put and making a police report. And so the guy ends up going to jail. Now Jenna goes all over the country and she talks about sexual assault, things to look for, things she can do. So it's an excellent book, and it talks about her going down to Austin and getting the laws passed. So the lessons from the Jenna Quinn story for me is, boy, close to home. So when you think about it, there's lots of times where the coach would say, hey, I'll take her. I'll pick her up and I'll drive her. Now, the Boy Scouts of America, as you recall, had a huge sex scandal where the troop leaders were sexually assaulting the young men and the boys. And so they put things in place to try to stop this from happening. One was a thing called two deep leadership, where two adults have to be with a youth. You cannot have one adult with a scout. There has to be at least two adults. And that's something that we can look at in the Jenna Quinn. This guy gets access to her by himself all the time. And that's where something can happen. And we definitely also need to watch for, she had some signs where she started doing self-harming and lost interest, was no longer interested in sports. So she had some of the classic signs. But like in my case, I don't think I had those signs. I was involved with trampoline, gymnastics, springboard diving, martial arts. I was out active. I did not have those signs. I might have hurt myself, but it wasn't intentional. It was all these crazy tricks I was trying on the trampoline and on the high bar. That's a dangerous sport. But I wasn't doing any self-harming. And so you may not always see those classical signs. And that's why the other things will be important. So children are most likely to be harmed by someone they know. And here's a news story that talks a little bit more about abuse.
It's a number child abuse investigators find hard to understand. 8 out of every 10 children who are sexually assaulted are abused by someone they trust or love. KFDM's Ashley Gaston learned today how one woman is taking the next step in educating law enforcement and others about this epidemic. Ashley?
Greg, a 1-year-old girl was the youngest patient referred to child abuse in forensic services this past year. Brenda Garrison is a certified nurse examiner and founder of the organization. She told me the number of assaults is increasing while the victims are younger than ever. A 6-year-old girl is the youngest to get the sexually transmitted disease, chlamydia. Children come here to Child Abuse and Forensic Services in Belmont to receive an exam. The camera will capture images that show sexual abuse of children. It magnifies the injured area 4 to 25 times. Garrison says she has examined more than 1 child a day since the beginning of August. That is an increase in exams compared to the first part of the year. In all, 99 children received an exam because of sexual assault during January to July of this year. That number is down compared to the first part of 2012. Garrison says these numbers may look low, but sexual assault is the least reported of all violent crimes, and parents need to listen to their children.
It's just to stay calm, number one, and then and believe them, because research will tell you that most of the time when children make outcries of sexual abuse or inappropriate behavior by someone, it's usually true.
Garrison says the next step in getting child abusers off the streets is educating prosecutors about the abuse. The training programs are free of charge for law enforcement agencies.
So I was about, I think, 21 years old when I first told someone I was dating when I was 18, the story. But the next time I told it to someone I didn't know, it was in a group setting. And two of the people that were running this training program afterwards asked me to come in and talk. They needed to talk to me. And they wanted to talk about why I would make up this story and lie about what happened to me. And I said, I didn't lie about what happened to me. That's what happened to me. And they thought, they didn't believe it. They said, if you're not crying, you know, and you, if that happened to you, you'd be all tore up. And so a lot of times people don't believe people when they tell them. And so that's why if a child comes to you, it has happened where a child makes an outcry that wasn't true, but it's very rare. So if a child makes an outcry, it's probably, you can probably rely on that. Okay, so I got a question for you. I want you to put your answers in the chat, and I'm going to have Rachel, if you'll tell me what you're seeing. So to adequately protect children, what do we need to be aware of? Because I'm talking about awareness. Aware of what? That's what I want you to work on right now in the chat. And if you will read off to me some things they're saying, what do we need to be aware of? Anything?
Changes, changes in behavior,
Yes.
where your child is at all times.
Oh, that's a good one. Where is your child? Who are they with? And what are they doing? Let me just talk about that for a minute. You know, you may say to yourself, hold on one second. I didn't mean to do that. I want to go back here. You may say to yourself, you know, I need to tell you something that's kind of a scary thought. You don't have to be a heroin addict like my parents were to not have a clue with what your child is doing. You just have to be busy. And I don't know many parents that aren't busy these days. And so if you say to yourself, I don't have time to keep track of my kids, I'd say to you, well, you know, the predator, like the person, we're going to call him Dwayne in my case, we'll make up a name, Dwayne. So in my case, Dwayne say, if you don't have time for your child, don't worry about it, because Dwayne, he's got plenty of time. He will make your child a priority. Now, when I say that in a live seminar, I like to say that to see the expression on the face of the parents where they say, oh, heck no. And now they have a new resolve that they are going to know where those children are. And that's a good thing to do, to know where they are, who they're with, and what they are doing. What else you got, Rachel?
Being careful about your surroundings.
Yeah, that's a good thing. And it's also important to teach our children. And we talked about safety rules, you know, what we call situational awareness, being aware of your surroundings. Anything else there?
That was the last one.
Okay. So definitely we need to be aware of that, how prevalent it happens, that it can happen to people that you don't expect. You know, every time something happens, people are shocked. Every time a big crime happens and people say, these things don't happen in this neighborhood. Almost every time. And when you hear about things, I remember a case in Plano with a coach, and I had to say to myself, I always say, nothing shocks me. That one shocked me. This was my all-time favorite PE coach. I used to go do trampoline shows at the elementary schools, and this coach was my favorite. Turned out he was sexually abusing some of the boys at his school. I just couldn't believe that. So, you know, I thought he was fantastic, but you can't tell. And so to adequately do that, we need to make sure we're aware of that. There was another case in Plano. There's a book written called Almost Gone. And this is a story about a case that came out of Plano. Let's listen in.
Test for. Now we take you to a chilling story of a Plano teenager who was almost gone and her family suddenly thrown into a race to save her from becoming a victim of human trafficking. Here's our Rebecca Lopez.
Stephanie and John Baldwin are the all-American family. They raised their children in Plano and took them on camping trips and to Disneyland. They are strong Christians, and John is the deacon at his church. That's why they were shocked when one of her friend's parents called them with startling news about her.
Mackenzie's involved in an online relationship, and she's engaged to marry a guy in Kosovo, and she's planning to leave the country and not tell you guys.
Their teenage daughter, Mackenzie, had obtained a passport and stashed away $5,000 from her job. She was about to leave the country to marry a charming man she met online in an international chat room. The man called himself Adam, was Muslim, and lived in Kosovo. He manipulated the young girl and wooed her with romantic letters.
She wouldn't have recognized me at all. I was not a confident person. I literally only wanted him. And when I say I was obsessed, a lot like people with drugs.
Mackenzie had gone through great lengths to keep her parents in the dark, including using fake phones and fake Facebook and creating a P.O. box.
Then I would just slowly start covering my tracks more and more.
When the Baldwins learned what was happening, they quietly began to come up with a plan to stop their daughter.
Searching her room, searching her vehicle, doing anything we could do to get evidence to take to the authorities. And we had to do all that in secret.
They feared Mackenzie, who had just turned 18 years old, would bolt. So they brought in the FBI.
We staged an intervention, the FBI did. And so what we wanted to do is scare her straight.
I personally believe that he had the intent to sex traffic me.
Parents say the FBI also told them in that region of the world, girls are lured for not only sex, but to harvest their organs.
But in the end, she listened to him.
They have just written a book called Almost Gone to warn other parents and teens about what can happen. The family says it was a long and painful journey, but they saved.
Okay, so that is a really scary thing that they went through, and that was really close. And thank goodness the parents actually jumped in and got law enforcement involved and was able to intervene and prevent something that'd be really tragic. Human trafficking is a big problem. We're hearing more and more about it. I remember the first time I heard about it, I'm like, what are they talking about? But it is something that people are out looking to see. It was really sad when I took a law enforcement human trafficking course to realize that American men are the #1 consumers of human trafficking and looking for underage women. Most of you probably have seen the movie To Catch a Predator. And who's on there trying to hook up with these 12 and 13-year-old girls? All kinds of people, right? I think I've seen almost every profession. We have teachers and law enforcement, firefighters. I mean, the cream of the crop professions are trying to get together with underage young women and young men. And so human trafficking is something we have to be concerned about. And here's a short little clip on that as well.
Welcome back. It is 7:54. The Texas Attorney General's office is calling on all Texans to fight human trafficking or sex slavery.
Fox 4's Dan Godwin has details on a new video that's going to help people recognize this horrific crime.
It's an ad taken off back page. It says 19, but her age is what? 15.
Gangs who used to primarily traffic guns and drugs are now turning to trafficking children.
The Texas Attorney General's office is trying to bring attention to a problem that is all too real in the state of Texas and across the United States, human trafficking. Want to say hello to Melissa Holman, an Assistant Attorney General based in Austin. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
We use the term human trafficking. It really amounts to modern day slavery. We are talking possibly forced prostitution or forced labor. What is the basic message that the AG's office is trying to get out?
The AG's office wants people in Texas to understand that human trafficking is a crime that is occurring here. And there's a public conception that it's only a problem in our big cities like Houston and Dallas. But our message is that it can happen anywhere, because ultimately where you have buyers, you have sellers. And we want the average Texan to feel empowered to understand what is human trafficking and how to spot it if they happen to run into a victim of this crime.
And there is this video now available for the general public, produced by your office. And the video includes a woman who now lives just south of Dallas, who tells just a horrific story of her own experience with human trafficking.
And she asked me, was I okay? I told her, I looked around, make sure he wasn't there. And then I told her I needed help. Girls like me are kept. It's happening in your backyard, right next door to you.
We were extremely honored to have a couple of survivors share their story with the film, and I think that makes it very powerful for the viewer. Tanya Stafford was just a young girl in the Dallas area whose mother actually sold her to her trafficker, who kept her captive for a number of years. She was ultimately rescued essentially through the kindness and intervention of a neighbor, and Tanya shared her story with the film.
And human trafficking can sometimes begin with an abduction. But that's not usually how it starts, right?
Sure. I think there's a public conception sometimes that it's always a crime of violence, or it's stranger danger sort of situation where you're getting abducted. What is truthfully more common for us, especially in the case of minor sex trafficking, is for the child to possibly be a runaway or to even believe that they're in a romantic relationship with the trafficker. In the case of minor sex trafficking, the law does not require that force, fraud, or coercion was used.
And in terms of statistics, almost 79,000 minors and young people are victims of sex trafficking in Texas, according to a study published by UT Austin last year. Another 234,000 workers are victims of labor trafficking. And again, this is a crime that knows no boundaries when it comes to race, ethnicity, gender, kids, and adults.
Yes, the crime, both sex and labor trafficking, can occur across the income spectrum. It can occur from children up through adults, any race, socioeconomic status. It's really a crime that knows no bounds.
All right, Melissa Holman, Assistant Attorney General, thank you so much for the chat. If you're interested in seeing this very important video that we've been talking about, we've got a link at our website. Just go to Fox 4 News.
Yeah, I doubt we'll be able to find that Fox 4 News link anymore, but important information and probably a great story. I was having some technical difficulties at the beginning of the program, so I want to backtrack and give a big shout out. Thank you for being here tonight. I appreciate you spending some precious family time with us to talk about this important topic. I want to thank the library, Kristen, for initially agreeing to partner, and Rachel, she's always busy behind the scenes getting us ready, and also helping us with tech is Sabrina. So thank you very much for all that you do. Okay, I want to take questions about any questions about awareness. Any questions you have, can you type it in before we move on to our next, to the B? Does anyone have any questions on awareness? And Sabrina, and I think I actually figured out how to watch the chat myself, so. I don't see anything happening there yet. Do you, Sabrina or Rachel?
There is a question. It says, what should we watch out for in regards to human trafficking?
Well, something, you know, as far as that would be something like, what if you start seeing stuff like cars, what you might think of like even prostitution, right? So here's a house. I believe there was one in Plano that was busted, but you got a house and you got a high vehicle traffic. All of a sudden, these people, men are coming and going at all hours of the night, things like that. And like, what are they doing? How many visitors do they have? It's usually one person that shows up one at a time and coming, just lots of traffic. Same things that sometimes you might think it might be narcotic related, instead could be a human trafficking situation. So something that just doesn't look right. Remember when we talk about to immediately call 911 if you see any suspicious person, vehicle, or circumstance, we're not saying only call if you see a crime. We're saying to report suspicion. So if something doesn't look right, particularly that gut feeling of yours, you don't like that intuition, trust the intuition and call 911 and let the officers go and investigate it. Any other questions?
Yes, another one saying, how do we protect children from online activity?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I have a program. If you go and you search, I don't think it's on, you can find the link if you go to the YouTube channel and just search my last name, Bianez, and then look for this one with Detective Jeff Rich. And he specialized, his full-time job is family violence. But what he does is he goes undercover and he's online and he finds these predators who are going after these children. And he's an award-winning investigator who has helped break up a lot of these rings for child sexual assault and abuse. And he's just fantastic. So I did an interview with him and you can find that. So it is called True Crimes and it's Detective Jeff Rich. And the topic was to protecting children from online predators. And I asked him, and I have one of the slides coming up, but one of the things I asked him was, I said, well, is it like the old days where these predators would go where they would find children, which was the playground, the school grounds, the parks? And he said, yes, but now these predators can be in your child's bedroom through their devices. And so we really need to know what they're doing online. And I asked them, try to get some scoop on those Vault apps, because there are some apps where children, and they'll be educated on this by other youth, or maybe even from the predator, will tell them to download this. And it might look like a calculator, and you put in something and it's the code, and it opens up and it shows you a picture, but there's another code you put in and that shows you the pictures they don't want you to see, or the videos or the material they don't want you to see. And so you have to be aware of these Vault apps. And he said one of the things to do is to sit down with your child and say, hey, I don't know much about Snapchat. Can you teach me? And sit down and let them teach you all about it. But to take the time to get educated on what they're using and the different apps they're using, learn about it so that you can understand, and to open the lines of communication, to start early and often and dialogue with them and let them know about the dangers that exist online, and teach them some rules. And we'll get to that when we talk about the safety rules. Was there any other question?
Yes, looks like there was one more question. How do you protect your kids in daycare or with a babysitter?
So it's more difficult if you have like a babysitter and they don't have any cameras or anything like that. You're just like rolling the dice, in my opinion. So if I have my child in a daycare, but even like when I take my furry baby to, Pet Palooza, whatever it's called, Sparta, Pet Palazzo, I want to see those cameras. And I like my dog to stay in a room that has a camera, just so I feel that the people will be on their best behavior because the camera's there. So one of the keys would be to do that, to have a facility that has cameras that you can access, have a facility that you can drop in at any time. And there's a couple good resources, books. One is that one, he does a deep dive on how you screen a daycare center. And that would be that one I shared called Protecting the Gift by Gavin DeBecker. That's a really good resource, Protecting the Gift by Gavin DeBecker. And he has a whole section on what you should ask these daycare providers. And it's really good information. And another one is Protecting Children from Predators, is another good book that has been published, I read recently. Okay, I'm going to switch back to, well, not that way. Let me go forward to the slides. Come on. My poor computer's working hard trying to keep up. Okay, so we're going to go to our B now, which is build relationships of trust. So that begins with the question, does your child trust you enough to come to you with anything? Do they know, no matter how unpleasant or disappointing it might be to you to hear that they have done something, can they come to you? So that's one of the things that you need to really build that relationship. If you ever need anything, if anything happens, that you can come to me, to really have your child know that. That is a really big plus. With sexual abuse, think about this. With sexual abuse happening anywhere by trusted adults, how will you ever know if it's occurred? How? That's actually, someone type something in there. How can you tell if it's happened? It's happening pretty much anywhere with adults they trust. How will you even know it happened? And let me know if you see something in that chat. I'm going to peek over here. Okay, I don't see anything. Anyone have an idea? How are you going to know that something has occurred with your child? And the only way that I think you're going to know, since I don't see anyone chatting in there, is if they tell you. And how are they going to tell you? Well, that's why you've got to build the relationship of trust. If they don't trust you, if they don't think you can handle the scary, disappointing, embarrassing, heartbreaking, terrible thing that happened, they're not going to tell you. And if you don't have that trusting relationship, so you've got to build it. And then you go to our C, which is communication. When it comes to communication, the most important thing, in my opinion, you need to communicate is your love. You have to communicate how much you love this child, and that this child means the world to you, and they can come to you with anything. You need to let them know that you're strong enough to hear the experiences your child has had. I remember when I went to my grandmother And I told my grandma, she said how lucky I was to go with Daryl. Or Dwayne, I mean. So Dwayne, she thought he was just so great to take me away from the drug abuse that was happening at the house and some of the suffering that my brothers and sisters went through. And I said, Grandma, this guy was not this great guy. Oh, I think you had a lot better than your brothers and sisters. I said, really? Do you know? And I started to tell him, do you know that he was a child molester? Do you know the first thing he did was have me stripped naked and take pictures of me by the Christmas tree? And the next thing that happened is my grandmother doubled over, holding her stomach. And she said, Chris, I can't hear it. I can't take it. And I had to help her in the room. I had to help her in the house. She was bent over, holding her stomach in pain, and she didn't want to hear it. And I never really could share that with my grandmother. She couldn't take it. So can you take it? If your child has to tell you something, can you be strong enough for them to hear? If not, you probably won't know. And so that's one thing is they can tell you. And then the other thing we want to communicate is we want to give them some clear safety rules, things that will keep them safe. So what are some safety rules? Well, obviously good touch, bad touch. We need to teach them what is appropriate, where they cannot be touched. The most basic thing I've ever heard is things that cover the bathing suit. So parts that are covered by your bathing suit, people shouldn't touch. And we need them to know that if someone says, don't tell, what should they do? Right, tell. How soon should they tell? Right, immediately. So you teach them that if someone tells them don't tell, they're saying that because if they do tell, that person's going to be in trouble, not your child, because you love your child and you trust your child. And so they need to tell right away. And they also need to know to never go out of the public view with anyone unless you said it's okay. So that way they don't fall for that trick. Hi, I'm Dr. Smith and your mom is in the hospital, told me to come pick you up. No, we need to teach them all these little tricks. We need to teach them they're not going to go help someone because we teach our kids to be nice and helpful. But no, my safety first, his feelings last. When someone says, can you help me find the puppy? The answer is no. And they run to you or they run to whoever's in charge of them. So when it comes to good touch and bad touch, we need to be specific. Some of the best recommendations come from the National Center for Victims of Crime, and they recommend to use the real names, the penis, vagina, rectum, and they have a whole list of things that we should be able to tell our children. And some of these are that no adult or other child should put their hands down your pants, up your skirt. No one should touch your private parts, even through your clothing or your pajamas. No one should ask you to touch their private parts or ask you to remove their clothes. No one should take off your clothes, and no one should take pictures of you with your clothes off, and no one should take their clothes off in front of you. Now, there are people that have had things done to them, and they didn't think it was a problem because they weren't told about that. And so we need to teach them specifically what is appropriate, what's not appropriate, what should come to your attention. And if you're like me, anything on this list is not okay. And your child should come to you and you will believe them. You will believe your child and you will help protect your child. And then also, okay, so here's some traits. This is a scary list of traits for an ideal child for a predator to target. These are the type of people that the predator wants to find. One is someone who's quiet. Jenna Quinn was more of a quiet type. They want someone who's withdrawn. Oops, let me back up because that started auto feeding. They want someone who's quiet, someone who's withdrawn, someone who's compliant. In other words, they do what they want them to do. They're easier to manipulate and they're less likely to put up a fight. So if you see these characteristics in a child that you supervise or you have responsibility for, that's the type of thing that a predator is looking for. So we want to teach our children assertiveness, give them the confidence to speak up. One thing that's really good to say would be stop or I will tell. And if the predator thinks, see, that's not what they're looking for. They're not looking for assertive. They're looking for quiet and compliant and easy to manipulate. But someone says, stop or I'm going to tell, well, that's a problem for the predator. And so what they probably will do is stop and hope that their child's not going to tell. But of course, you're going to tell them, you're going to say that to them. And then the next thing you're going to do is tell, and I'll take it from there. I will keep you safe. And you could take heart from one. There's a 7-year-old child who was attempted to be kidnapped from a Walmart, but her parent put her in a stranger danger class, and it made all the difference. Let's take a look.
Stunning video shows a little girl fighting off a man who grabbed her in the toy aisle of a Walmart. Watch the surveillance video. It's out of Bremen, Georgia. Brittany Baxter's mom was just in the next aisle. The man quickly dropped the 7-year-old and ran away. Brittany says that she learned to kick and scream in the stranger danger class.
I was just like trying to do this, kick as hard as can.
And she said that a man had tried to kidnap her, had picked her up and put his hand over her mouth, and she was kicking and screaming, and he dropped her and then ran out.
It's chilling to know that how quick something can happen. It actually sent chills up when I saw that.
Yeah, police arrested 25-year-old Thomas Woods and they charged him with attempted kidnapping. He recently got out of prison, but he says that he's innocent in this case and denies ever even being at the store.
You probably don't believe that, do you? Well, so which apps? I asked which apps are safe for children, and Detective Rich said, I can't tell you that this one's safe and that one's not safe because they all of them could be misused to get to children. And so basically, that's when he told me that you really have to be aware and learn the apps, learn the technology. He says, we just have to learn, there's many things we have to learn in life. And one thing we need to learn is the technology our kids are on. We need to take the time. We need to open lines of communication. We need to learn about technology, and we need to continue to dialogue with them and let them know that we're here and they can come to us with anything. So his opinion was there's no apps that are safer than other apps, but you do need to be aware of what's going on. Okay, we're going to look at some case studies, some things that have happened. So here's a new story, then we'll debrief it.
A Denton County Sheriff's deputy lost his job after he was arrested on a child sex charge. Weston Jordan is charged with online solicitation of a minor. Police say he was trying to meet up with who he thought was a 16-year-old boy when he was busted in a sting operation. Fox 4's Phil Alvarado is live from the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office with that story. Phil.
Natalie, apparently investigators did not know they were communicating with another law enforcement officer, but they were there to confront him when he showed up at a meeting place in Hurst. The DPS and the Tarrant County Sheriff's Department set up a sting operation involving online solicitation of a minor. One of the suspects ended up being a veteran Sheriff's Sergeant, Wes Jordan. Police were waiting for him. He ended up in jail and fired from the Denton County Sheriff's Department. Attorney Trent Lofton is not associated with this case.
Reaching out to someone he thought was a child, which has no place, especially in the police department or in our society.
A court document says Jordan believed he was communicating online with a 16-year-old boy, but when he showed up for the arranged meeting, the age changed. Police say he told officers he was waiting on an 18-year-old male he met online. In a statement, Denton County Sheriff Tracy Murphy said, "I am shocked and ashamed by the arrest of one of our own for such a horrible crime."
Officers in the state of Texas and the United States are out.
He's not the last. He's not the first, rather, and he's not going to be the last. And so we need to teach children that it doesn't matter what type of job the person has. We have to teach safe practices. And sometimes we have to go hands-on and hold on to our kids while they're trying to be kidnapped right from us. Here's, you may have seen this story, but this is just a crazy story where the kidnapper tries to steal her right there in front of the mom. Let's take a look.
Attempted abduction was caught on camera in Florida. A mother and daughter shopping when suddenly a man grabbed the daughter and tried to drag her away. The mother grabbing on for dear life, refusing to let go. NBC's Kerry Sanders shows us.
Parents live in fear of what you're watching. A stranger grabs a 13-year-old girl and tries to drag her out of a dollar store, all caught on store security cameras.
Attempted kidnapping just occurred.
The teenager's mom heroically fights to get her daughter free. The man keeps dragging. He finally gives up and runs out of the store.
All units responding to Dollar General.
The suspect, 30-year-old Craig Leslie Bonello, is in custody tonight, charged with kidnapping and child abuse. Bonello was captured because just moments after he ran out the front door of the dollar store here, in walked off-duty deputy John Bennon.
Started yelling at me, John, he just tried to kidnap a girl.
A bystander shot this video on her cell phone as almost a dozen deputies arrived. But by then, Deputy Bennon had already pulled his patrol car around back, blocking the suspect's car.
And I started banging on the glass with my firearm.
Attempted kidnappings by someone the child or the family does not know is very rare. Less than 1% of abductions are by a complete stranger. About 66% of victims of those non-family child abductions are girls.
Hadn't been for that mother's action, we could be dealing with a tragedy right now.
Tonight, the suspect's lawyer says his client is a veteran with psychological problems. Kerry Sanders, NBC News, Hernando, Florida.
That's really scary. And you probably saw the other case, I think it was down in Addison, where the person did knock over the mom and pulled the daughter into the car and took off. I think she was like 8 years old, if I'm remembering this correctly. And he was gone with her for a couple of hours before they were able to locate that car and capture that guy at a hotel with the young lady. So just a terrible incident. I'm going to put on full screen here and look. Oh, there was a case where in Princeton where a guy pulled up and said, "Hey, buddy, we're buddies. Get in." So he's trying to take away from that. I'm not a stranger. I'm a buddy, and see if the child would get in. Okay, so Elizabeth Smart abduction. This is where somebody mentioned in the chat that you shouldn't, bring them, careful who you bring home. And this was the case with Elizabeth Smart. Elizabeth Smart's mother was walking through Salt Lake City, I believe, with Elizabeth and her sister. And she came across someone who was homeless and she felt compassion for him. And she handed him a $5 bill and she said, "You know what, hold on." And she wrote down her husband's phone number for him and said, "Listen, if you need work, I'll call my husband." And he did. He went to the house. But what she didn't know is that while he was there, he was looking at Elizabeth and thinking, she's going to be my wife. And about a year afterwards, he came and broke into the house. They'd left a window open and they cut the screen and they went inside and he took her at knife point. And then there was about a 9-month rape ordeal. He raped her almost every day for 9 months. But she is one of the lucky ones. I'm one of the lucky ones. Most people who are gone more than 30 days, in my case, I was gone 6 months. But usually those people don't survive. And so we are lucky. And again, most of the people are not strangers. There was a guy named John Wayne Gacy, and he attacked a lot of young men he knew. The second person he killed was a guy named John who worked for him for over a year. And then he invited him in the house. Now, this was before the day of the cell phones, but a good thing to teach your child is that you need to know where your child is at all times. Later, he used to do these clown shows, and they later became known as the Killer Clown because they found 29 teenage boys and young men in the crawl space of his house. But there are so many cases. There's the case of where this guy, Ariel Castro, grabs these 3 girls, Amanda Berry, Michelle Knight, Gina De Jesus. All 3 of them got into his car. And 2 of them, Michelle didn't know him. And the second girl didn't know him. He said, "Oh, my son works where you do." And then the third person was best friends with his daughter. And he said, "Hey, can you help me go find her?" Ted Bundy, he took this young lady and murdered them by asking if they would help him with a cast. And that's what we teach our children. My safety first, your feelings last. And Kimberly Leach, great story, a lesson to learn from here. He walks on, this is again, Ted Bundy walks onto a middle school campus, grabs her by her wrist and starts dragging her off. She's crying, and I believe it was a lieutenant for a fire department, looked over, saw her being dragged off by Ted Bundy and chuckled to himself, "Someone's in trouble tonight." And he mistakenly believed that was her father. And we need to teach our children, even young children, someone's taking them someplace, they need to scream the magic words, "Help, this is not my father," or "This is not my mother." And now these bystanders, we'll get some bystander interaction if that's done, because none of us would allow someone to do that if we knew someone was in danger like that. So that's important. The J.C. Lee Dugard story is she's walking on her way up to the bus stop when a man and a woman pull up, and she thinks they want directions. And she said in an interview, what else would it be? And the light bulb went on for me. If our children cannot imagine it, they cannot defend against it. So parents, it's not enough to just tell them not to go up to a car. We need to tell them why, because someone might grab you and steal you. And J.C. Lee Dugard, she was gone for 18 years. And again, she's a lucky one. She got rescued. All right. Any questions for me before we wrap up?
Looks like there was a slightly older question. How can you tell if a person is being trapped in human trafficking when they may be out in public? What do you do if they ask for help? Do you call police?
Yeah, if somebody asks for help, you want to go ahead and call the police, because we don't know, right? We just have to err on the side of caution. We know that this is a real thing. We don't know. Like I don't know why. I'm thinking, like, why did I run and land on the couch? I wouldn't mean human trafficking, but I was being kind of, held by this guy. Why didn't I run for help? I don't know why. And Elizabeth Smart, when she was taken out of her house, the car went right by, a police car. And right there, before she was even taken up in the mountains, why didn't she run and jump on the hood? Oh, just fear. And so a lot of times people, they can't act for themselves, and they're going to need your help. So if you see something, or if they ask for help, yes, we're calling 911. You're not going to be held liable, but boy, wouldn't you feel terrible if you did not call and someone needed help? So anything that looks bad, we're going to call. I'm going to show you a quick thing. We have a thing called the Citizens Police Academy, and this is like a quick little 1 minute preview of what it is, and we'd love to have you come join us if you're interested. So let's take a look.
Chris, it looks like the video went off.
That is not what we're supposed to be watching. What happened to the... I don't know. What happened here? Okay, here we go. Let's try this. That's better. This is great fun. Now, I would definitely wait till we get out of COVID and we don't have any of these restrictions, because some of the fun things we can't do, like the ride along, you get to get in the vehicle with a police officer, go for an 8-hour ride along if you want. During the program, you get a shoot, don't shoot night where you're given a pistol and you go in to a scenario and you have to make a split-second decision. Do you shoot or don't shoot? Oh, it's an eye-opener. My favorite day is drive day, because you get to get in the squad car. I'll be out there with the music and the microphone. I'll be leading the Cupid Shuffle, the Cha-Cha Slide, having you guys dancing with me while you get to race the squad car around the same track that we train on for a time. You get 3 timed runs, and the third one is lights and sirens. It's free. You have to either live or work in Plano. So Rachel, get a bunch of your buddies and come on and join. But again, wait till we get past the thing. In closing, I want you to remember that you can protect children. Remember, trust your intuition. It may not be a big, loud voice. It might be a still, small voice. Remember the ABCs, to be aware that these things are frequent and happens, and often happens close to home. Build relationships of trust by letting your children know how much you love them, you care about them, and you'll be happy to hear anything that happens, no matter how scary it is, and you will help to keep them safe. And then communicate with them early and often at age-appropriate lessons, but teaching them the important things about their body and that they can, again, come to you. And if someone says, don't tell, to tell, because together we can protect children. My name is Chris Bianez. Thank you for joining us today.
Chris, do you have time for one more question?
I sure do.
All right. Someone asked if there is a safety webinar or class for 10 and 13-year-old range.
There's not. I say the reason I use the 11-year-old, I think when J.C. Lee Dugard was abducted at the age of 11. So I say, listen, by the time they're 11, we need to have this scary talk about safety. So I say, just go to my personal safety seminar. We have a recording of it so you can preview it. We did that with the library. And Rachel, what is the date? I've meant to get a slide, but I had a bunch of crazy technical difficulties today, so I wasn't able to prepare it. We have one more, don't we? Identity theft, frauds, and scams. Do you know when that is?
Yes, I am pulling it up. So give me just a second.
I think I had a slide many moons ago about all the different ones. Let me see if I can find it. I don't know what this one is. Nope. Hey, there's some music. So I would say you can look at the one that we recorded. If you go to the YouTube channel and then type in Plano, Texas Library, then click on the logo, and then in the search field, type in personal safety, and you'll find that 1 hour recording. You can watch it, and if you think it's appropriate for your children, then do that. Otherwise, you could gather a bunch of kids. I would say I use the 11 years old and up, but if you think your 10-year-old's mature enough to be in there, you could also put a group together. If you live in Plano, we can do it in Plano. I've got facilities like the libraries. We can rent the room at no cost if I reserve it for a program, or we could do it via Zoom. Any other questions?
Your next program, Protect Yourself from Identity Theft, Fraud, and Scams, is on October 11th at 7 p.m.
October. Oops, I'm trying to do an overlay here. I don't know if it's going to let me do it. October 11th at what time? 7 p.m.?
7 p.m. on Zoom, and then put the registration link in the chat.
Okay. Oh, good. Okay, so we have one. It's Identity Theft, Frauds, and Scams, October 11th. And it's going to be, again, sponsored by the library. And you can go to the calendar. What is the address? I was trying to find so I could copy the link. What's the best way to go to find the calendar that has the programs?
When you go to the City of Plano's website, under the resident tab, there is an events calendar link, and that has all city events, and most of them are the library.
Oh, okay. So go to the City of Plano and then residents and then events.
Yes. I'll put that link in the chat too.
Oh, great. Any other questions pop in there?
There was a thank you and a question about who to contact for setting up an event like that for children.
Yeah, so for an event like that for children, it depends on where you're located, what officer you're going to get. You can call the crime. I'm going to type this in, Crime Prevention Unit. And the number is 972-941-2431. And let me see if I can pop that up. Okay, so that's the Crime Prevention Unit right there, the number. And you would just call, and depending on where it is, if I have everything from Coit to the West City limits. So if you wanted me to do it, then you say, hey, you can call me, contact me directly. And my information is going to be, let's see, I think on this last screen. Oh, let me share this again. Is that the wrong one? It's the wrong one. Oh me, oh my. these little problems I've had today with this. Okay, where's all my stuff? Okay, maybe this is it. Okay, that's my contact information. So if you want me to do it, if you want me to do it on Zoom, you just send me an email, christopherb@plano.gov, or you can just reach out to me, 972-941-2437, and we can coordinate it. And we'll just, if you want to do it live, any place west of Plano, and if you don't have a place like that, we'll just coordinate it with these wonderful libraries. So we could use like is it Haggard on Coit?
Yes.
Haggard on Coit. And then another one I like to use is, what's the one way out there?
Schimmelpfennig. Oh, Parr? Yeah, that's West Plano.
Schimmelpfennig's on the other side of Custer. So that would be a different officer.
Yes.
I have everything from Coit to the west city limits.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
I'm not seeing any.
All right. Well, Rachel and Sabrina, thank you so much for all that you do to support us and all the wonderful programs you bring to Plano. You can see why I don't like to ever record my programs in case you have glitches like we did at the beginning. But thank you for all that you do to bring good programs. And I look forward to identity theft, frauds, and scams. And hopefully I'll have all this resolved before then.
All right. Well, we'll see you soon.
Okay. Thanks so much.